of the Hachaim Kodesh, the Holy Hachaim. And Hachaim talks about on the first pasuk. He talks about the angels that Yaakov sent angels to Esau. He wants to find out what's going on in Esau's mind. What is Esau planning? What is he thinking? Rashi told us that when he sent these malachim, these emissaries, it meant physical, it meant angels, physical. It meant real angels, malachim mamish, which is based on a medrash, of course, that that's what it means. When it says malachim, it doesn't just mean he sent some messenger, it means he sent real angels. The Hachaim agrees with that. And the thing is that the Hachaim says that you really have to look at the pasuk, the verse, and realize there's a few different grammatical or word changes in the pasuk that really shouldn't be there. And the fact that they're there shows us and tells us that there must be something that's being hinted. So the pasuk says, Yaakov sent angels before him. That's a surprising way to talk. Where did he send the angels? He sent them to Esau. So is that the way to say it? I sent angels before me to Esau? Or you sent angels to Esau? What's this word lefanov? He sent angels before him. So as we've seen over the last few months where we've been learning the Hachaim, he often looks into these little questions that of the wording, about the wording, and and based on that, he understands the pasuk in a certain way, which will answer that question. So what's bothering the Hachaim here is, why does it say he sent angels before him? Right? That seems like a very extra word that's totally not needed. Sent angels to Esau. He sent angels from before him to Esau. Where did he send them from? Sent them from somewhere else. He had to speak to them, so he sent them to Esau. What does it mean? He sent them from before him to Esau. So then it mentions Esau, his brother, which is another question. Why does it say his brother? We know who Esau is. We've been learning Parshas Toldos. We know Esau has a brother, is the brother of Yaakov. So why does it have to say his brother, Achim? And why does it also say Artsa Seir Sedei Yadai? He sent them to Esau. Where he sent them? He sent them where Esau was exactly. He was in Seir. He was he sent the angels to find out where he is. Well, it's not really changing much to know exactly what city he was in. And the Hachaim then goes even further and says, why does it use the word Artsa, which could also be worded le'aretz? It's the same. There are two ways of saying to the land of. One is le'aretz, to the land of, or one is artsa. A hey at the end of the word is just like putting a lamed before it. So the Hachaim asks, okay, it's the same as doing that, putting a hey at the end. But he says, but why did you change it? Why didn't you put the lamed at the beginning? Why are you putting a hey at the end? In other words, the Hachaim understands it that there must be a hint to something. There must be hinting something. If it says a hey at the end, and it could have just said a lamed in the beginning of the word. We always know that a lamed, that he went to a certain city, you would say lecharon, le'eretz Yisrael. You put a lamed in the beginning. That's the normal way. The hey at the end is an alternative, but why go to the alternative when you could use the regular way? So there must be some hint here. So now comes the Hachaim's insight. The Hachaim says that the pasuk is explaining, why did Yaakov take advantage of angels? In other words, Yaakov just has angels that he just sends them to do his jobs, like go find out what's going on over there. I want to buy a certain stock, so maybe find out what's going on in that company. He just sends angels around. The pasuk is explaining how could he just use angels? Angels are, servants of Hashem. He's just sending them to go do some of his business. Go find out about Esav. I'd like to know what's going on there. So the pasuk is trying to allow us to understand how Yaakov could just go about taking advantage and using angels that are supposed to be Hashem's servants. He calls them Mesharsei Elyon, the servants of the above, of the heavens, of Hashem, the one above, the Elyon, and heavenly servants. So how could he just do that? Let him. You want to know what's going on? What's with Esav? Go send your Secretary of State. Go send your physical people. What are you sending the angels? Why is he taking advantage and using angels? So on this, it says lefanov. This is why it says lefanov, that the angels were before Yaakov. What does it mean that they were before him? It means that for some reason, these angels were hanging out by Yaakov, and he tried to figure out, what are these angels doing over here? Just hanging out here? There must be some deeper meaning behind these angels. Why are they hanging out here? It must be that this is a sign that I am meant to use them when I need them. And and this is a scenario where I need them. Why? Because Yaakov felt, I can't use human beings. Human beings in this scenario won't work. Why not? Because the pasuk explains. So again, the pasuk is explaining to us, why did Yaakov use angels? So when you learn this pasuk, I guess we're not used to dwelling on the stories of the Chumash. A lot of times we just read through the Chumash every year, But if you think about it, he's using angels and he's sending angels to find out what's going on with Esav. The Hachaim makes us dwell on this and say, is that right? Can you just take angels and just use them? And so the pasuk explains, yes. In this scenario, he used them because, first of all, they were lefanov. They were before him. They were hanging out there. Yaakov understood from that this is a message that they're meant to be used. That it's meant for Yaakov to use them. And on that, the question is, why was he so convinced? So it has to be that he felt that this was not a scenario where he could have used a regular person to send a person as a emissary. And what was the reason? Why? What was the problem? So the answer was because he's sending someone to Esav. And Esav was considered a prominent person. That's they bring from the Hachaim brings Kiyodua Lafi Devrehem, which means that he's basing it on a medrash, that it's known that Esav had some element of greatness to him. And a regular person would not have been successful to be able to have a good understanding of Esav. Why not? Number one, Esav might have not considered whoever he sent to be important enough, significant enough to want to have a dialogue with him or even respond to anyone's question. Or Esav might go and kill whoever it is. So Yaakov felt that he can't just send a regular person. So it's interesting. He says these two things. Number one is Esav was Adam Gadol. He's considered this prominent person, and maybe he won't listen to anyone who comes and wants to schmooze with him or connect, have a talk together. Maybe he'll even kill the person. Therefore, he needs to send angels. So Yaakov said, I have these angels right at my disposal. I may as well just use them. Not just may as well. I understand this is what God is saying. So now the Hachaim is giving us an understanding that Yaakov was hanging around with angels, and it's like, what are you angels doing here? It must be that I'm supposed to send you. I can use you to for this important mission. Yes, Mordechai.
Well, we know that the angels were there because the previous pasuk, which was the last pasuk in Vayetz, Rashi says that Machanaim means that there were two camps of angels, the ones the ones that might have left him at the border of Eretz Israel, and the ones who took over at the border.
So that's true. There were groups of angels, but what it seems like is that Yaakov understood that some of them are extra. In other words, what you're asking is, it seems that Yaakov needed these angels as escorts, so they're meant to be his escorts. So he can't just send them away. They're used. They're busy. They're not just hanging around. But it seems like Yaakov felt maybe these were extra, like maybe he had much more escorts now than he had before. So he felt, well, these are extra. They're not really being used as escorts. Maybe I don't need as many. I don't need so many escorts. And for whatever reason, he felt they're lefunav, they're before him for a reason, as if they're not needed. But if you want, we can take a look at what the Hachaim says over there. In the previous parsha, at the end of the previous parsha, I guess that would be the smart thing to do, is see what the Hachaim mentions there, because this seemingly should be connected to that. So the Hachaim there, he says that Yaakov met up with these angels, and so Vayifku boy malache elikim. So he says, why does it say Vayifku boy, and why does it say Vayomer Yaakov? Yaakov said, like, what do we need to know this for? What Yaakov said, what is it adding to our knowledge about what Yaakov said? What did Yaakov really add? He said, called it machanoim. When he saw this, he called it machanoim. So, and what does he mean by saying this? That it's the two camps, right? He called it machanoim, the two camps, the camp of angels that was escorting him outside of Israel, and the camp of angels that are escorting him in Israel. So the rabbis say, the rabbis have a insight over here about the angels. Seemingly, he's referring to what Rashi said. And then the Hachaim says that Hashem sent angels in the form of men, so that they would appear before Esav on Yaakov's behalf, as can be seen from the end of the story, which is recorded Parshas Vayishlach. So it's Hashem sent these angels that they should bidmus anoshim. They look like people, and so that's why it says. Just 1 second. So it says that's why the pasuk says that that Yaakov recognized them as angels. They suddenly takef umiyad samchu. They just like arrived in an instant, and that's what it means vayifku boy. That it means that they encountered him like they were right in front of him, and so when he saw them in this unusual way of that they came, like all of a sudden there's a whole camp there. He knew that these are not people; they're angels, and he called it machanoim, the two camps. It refers to the one that was people that would be his protectors to make a war with Esav. And the second one were angels in the form of people. Actually, two camps. It seems like what this means is there's one camp of people, the other camp is angels that look like people, and those are the angels that he's sending. So it sounds like the way the Hachaim is learning may be a little different than Rashi. It's interesting. Glad you mentioned this, Mordechai, because I guess it does change the shot a little. Well, it seems the way our Hachaim is learning is that there's two groups of angels. The angels were the way Rashi learned it was one group of angels are the angels of outside of Israel, the diaspora angels, and then there's the other group of angels that are the angels that are going to escort him inside Israel. The Chaim understands a little differently, that he had two groups of people, and one group were regular people, and the other group were a group of angels, and the group of angels that looked like people, and Yaakov realized that they're angels, and because they were vayifku, they just appeared out of nowhere, and Yaakov said, "Oh, this is a machane elikim," and he called it machanoim. This is a camp of Hashem, meaning these are angels, and they were in the demus of people, and he understood that they're meant that Hashem is giving them to him in order to send them. So, I mean, the answer to the question, I guess to your question is, it's the same answer that ultimately he realized these were meant not to just be escorts. The other ones were protection, or the other ones were for a fight. And these angels he recognized. But if you connect it to the pasuk in the last week's parsha, you get a little more addition to this insight, and that is that it's vayifku boy, that they happen to just appear out of nowhere. There he knew that they're meant to be, that he's supposed to use them for some reason. Okay, so anyway, getting back to the first pasuk here, where we have the word lefonav, that these angels were just in front of him. It must have meant that he's supposed to use them, and he needed them because he needed to send angels to find out about Esav, and Esav was not going to just speak to any regular person if he had a secretary of state or some other individual that he was going to send over. Not necessarily would Esav have respected the person and possibly even killed him. So therefore, he sent angels. Now, the Hachaim mentions another thing. He says Yaakov was also trying to scare Esav, and if he sent people, it'll be one thing. But if he sends angels, he's hoping that will be like a awe. It'll cause awe in the eyes of Esav when he realizes, Yaakov has these heavenly angels that he sends, and the Medrash mentions that these angels were levushe eish. The Medrash says that these angels were not regular, just angels, but they actually were clothed in fire, and Medrash says they were riding horses, roich susim, and so this is a additional point that the angels would cause an extra level of fear, and that Esav should be afraid to harm Yaakov. So that would be another reason to send these angels. And then, so it says he sent them to Esav. So again, why is he sending these angels? Number one, they're before him, and number two, because he's dealing with Esav, and that's why it says Esav. And then it says Achiv, his brother. We know it's his brother, but what it's saying is that why is Yaakov doing this whole thing with a gift and trying to win him over? Because it's his brother, and he's nervous of fighting a war. Yaakov does not want to fight a war with Esav. Why not? He's afraid Esav has chus avos. That's a very interesting thing. He's afraid Esav has the merit of his parents. Who's Esav's father? Yitzchok, who's his grandfather, Avram. Afraid that Esav has the merit of his parents, and Yaakov is afraid he might not win the war. That's a little surprising because Yaakov also has the merit of Yitzchok and Avraham, and he also has his own merit. So, sometimes you have it's an interesting question. Why? What was he thinking? Why is he so nervous? Why is Yaakov so nervous that he's not going to win a war against Esav? If Esav has maybe a little merit, but Yaakov obviously has more merit than him. I mean, or at least the same. Esav is doing sins all the time, but he has the merit of Avraham and Yitzchak. But Yaakov has Avraham, Yitzchak, and he has but he has his own merit as well, or at least why was he so nervous of war? So on a very simple level, I guess you could answer that Yaakov assumed that just like Esav does many sins, but nevertheless could be because his evil inclination is much stronger, and therefore maybe on Yaakov's level, maybe he also is not doing as much as he could to serve Hashem. And maybe because he doesn't have such a strong evil inclination, maybe maybe he's not on his level. Maybe he's not as good as Esav. In other words, Esav, maybe when he controls himself from some people, in other words, obviously when Esav goes to heaven, he's going to be judged according to all his deeds. So obviously he's not going to be looked at. He's going to be punished for all of his terrible things that he did. But in regard to if he has a fight with Yaakov and relying on merits, he might not be as bad as he seems, meaning he might have some extra merits of his own, and all the sins that he did might not be as bad as we think. Might be that he had a much stronger evil inclination, and Yaakov might not be as good, so to speak, as he looks, because it could be that Yaakov's evil inclination is very weak. He hardly has an evil inclination, and therefore could be that Yaakov is also not really serving Hashem to his full extent. At least this is what might be going through his head. So he's very nervous to fight a war, and therefore he is looking to try to flatter Esav and win him over. So that would be the understanding here of Achiv. So it's Yaakov is sending angels before him, the angels that are hanging out there, and he's sending them to Esav because he's nervous of sending people to Esav, and he's also sending them, in a sense, he's sending these angels, number one, because he's nervous of Esav, and nervous to send people to Esav, and he's also interested in showing Esav that he's connected to angels, that might cause a fear to Esav, and additionally, that he calls Esav his brother, and the reason he calls him his brother is because he is trying to send him a message of peace in order not to enter war, because he's afraid of war, because Esav has merit. What are the merits of Esav? His father and his grandfather. He also has those merits, but this is how Yaakov is thinking, that you never know. He's got the same merits and he has his own merits, but you never know how Hashem judges each person, and the type of challenges that he's going through might be different than the ones. The challenges of Esav might be different than Yaakov's. So this is one way of understanding it. Now, another way of explaining why it's Esav and Achiv. Again, the Hachaim is bothered with, why does it say he's sending these angels to Esav, his brother? We know it's his brother, and it seems like it's not necessary to say that. So, did you want to say something, Avram? Or, okay. The Hachaim gives another interpretation. He says, Esav is the enemy. Achiv means his brother, means brotherly love. And so he's sending these angels to evaluate if he's going to find that Esav is an enemy. So then you'll act accordingly. And if he sees that he's a brother, then the message will be a little different. In other words, he's going to customize the message based on how the angels will be told how to customize their message based on how they see. And this is something also that only angels can figure out, because a person could be deceived. Esav could deceive people. So this is another reason. So in other words, it's explaining that I'm sending angels to be, number one, there Hashem sent them to me. They're before me, and I'm sending them to find out if it's Esav or Achiv. El Esav Achiv to Esav, or to it's either Esav and the enemy, or they are my brother, and he's sending them to evaluate based on that. The message will be based on the conclusion, on the findings. And we specifically need angels to do this job because people will not be able to figure this out. Now, another interpretation is as follows. That, you know why it says lefanov? It means that he sent angels before him. In other words, before Esau, Yaakov sent angels to be the first. He wants to start early. And before Esav knows that he's coming, he wants the angels to get there first. And it's sort of like you want to have the upper hand to get there before, you want to be on the offense, not on the defense. You want to have the first licks. So he sent these angels first, and the reason he wanted them to go, and therefore he needed to send angels. He sent the angels because he wants them to be there before Esav has a chance to do anything. He wants them to get to him immediately. How do you get people to go to a faraway place immediately? How do you send an emissary to go to a faraway place immediately? By sending an angel, because an angel doesn't have to travel. An angel just appears. It's like a miraculous, appearance. And wherever they are, they can fulfill their mission, because they're not actually traveling. They're somehow, and of course, I don't know much about angels, but somehow the angels can be in the whole world at one shot. And so the angels, they won't have to travel. All they just do is turn to face Esav, and they're facing Esav. So it's momentarily they're there now, or immediately. Now, the whole, and the Hachaim adds the words, the whole world to the angels are like their Daled Amos, like their personal space, like meaning that they're everywhere, and they can appear anywhere at any time. It's not bound to space. An angel is not limited to space, and therefore he wants these angels to do this mission, and he wants them to be there right away. And the way the Hachaim understands the pasuk is as follows: Yaakov sent the malachim. It's interesting. You could translate it a little differently. The lefanov, to be before, to be there before Esav. But the way he translates it is, he sent the angels lefanov El Esav. What does that mean? That he sent the angels that were while they're in front of him, but yet they can be in front of Esav at the same time, even though Esav is far away. And that's what it says he's in Seir. But he's sending the angels that are Lefanov to Esav Achiv, who is in Seir in Sedei Edom. He's in the land of Seir. He's sending them that the angels that are before him, he's sending them there, which they can actually reach there and momentarily. Now, now the Hachaim had asked this interesting question of, surprise. It's not the common type of question you would ask, but the Hachaim asks it. He says, why does it say Artsah instead of La'aretz? Artsah really means the same thing. The Hachaim understands that La'aretz is the normal way the pasuk normally says to the land of, and Artsah also means to the land of, but it's not the regular way of speaking. So he says the reason it says it is that they didn't have to travel there. They're there right now. They're everywhere. They're not limited to space. So La'aretz would sound like they have to travel somewhere. Artsah means they have to be in that land. So Artsah, the Seir, they went to the land he sent them to the land of Seir. La'aretz means like you travel somewhere, you go to somewhere. They didn't go to somewhere. They were there. They're there. They're in the world. They're around. They turn around. They're there. They're not really traveling. They're not limited to space. So you don't really use the word la'aretz for an angel. They don't have to go there. They don't have to travel there. You don't use la'aretz. You just say artsah, to the land of. In other words, it's sort of like hinting that you're not traveling to the land of. You're in the land of. In a certain sense, that's what the Hachaim is getting at. That lamed in the beginning of the word means like you go to someplace. Artsah means almost like you're sort of there. It means to there, but in essence, it's missing that word to. So the Hachaim sees it as if it's mentioning specifically as an angel that doesn't really travel. So that's why it uses this term of artsah. Okay, and then the Hachaim says that he says all they have to do is turn around, turn their faces, and they speak to Esav. They don't have to go somewhere. And the same thing is when they answer back to Yaakov, they just stand there and give him the reply. They can give the message, relay the info exactly as they are standing. So that's why it says Artsah Seir. Now then it says Sedei Edom, the field of Edom, and the reason it says that is because Esav was living in that place called Edom. It was the field of Edom. And so what it means is that it's mentioning that they went and reached him before he left his place. They reached him in his place, meaning before he even from the earliest moment. They're catching him to give Yaakov the most prep that he needs. So it says that they went and found him in his place. In other words, before he even left, went on his journey, they're already getting the full info and surveillance of inside information right away. They're getting it right away, right in his field where he is, that he hasn't even left yet. They're already getting all of his thoughts, his intentions, his interests from the earliest moment. So that's why it says Sedei Edom, they caught him in his field, the field of Edom, which is where he is based. Now, the Hachaim then says that there's a little hint over here that the difference between, we know that Yaakov and Esav are Yaakov and Esav are a war that's going to last until Mashiach comes. So the Hachaim says that this pasuk is hinting to us the story of Yaakov and Esav, the three different times in this this relationship is we're gonna see the relationship in three different modes. So there's the mode of when they are the era, three different eras. So there's the era of when they're considered like brotherly, midas ha'achva, and that's Yaakov and Esav. It says Esav achiv. So in other words, the pasuk is hinting to us that Yaakov said the angels before him to Esav achiv, in the mode when Esav is the brother, and then there's the mode of Artza Seir. There's the mode of when they're the land of Seir, and then there's the mode of Sedei Edom. What are these three modes, three eras? So it says that the three eras are until the time of the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. It's basically a time of brotherliness. Now, it's not exactly brotherliness, but Edom did not really have a king until, which we actually just learned about it in Malachim, in the Book of Kings too, that after the reign of Yehoshaphat, that's when finally the Edomites announced a king. They proclaimed a king upon them. So which is the Hachaim says. So even though there was a time that the Hachaim says there was a time when Edom was actually under the Jewish dominion, which was until that time when Edom got their own king. So they were actually, in other words, the fact that Edom had a king actually doesn't necessarily mean there was a war, but the fact that Edom was under Jewish dominion, that's the question that Hachaim asks. He says, well, what do you mean? There was a time when Edom didn't have a king and they were under Jewish dominion. He says, but nevertheless, this was only a short time, and it's not significant enough to. It's basically the time of brotherliness. It's a time of brotherliness, even though Edom was under the jurisdiction of the Jewish people. Now comes the second time. When's the second era? The second era is when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And then until the time of Mashiach, that's going to be the second era. And that's the era of Artza Seir. And that's when Esav is considered great. And the Yidden are considered invisible almost. We are not Nikeres Lefana. We're not visible in comparison before Esav. We're sort of under the dominion of Esav, and this is what it means. Artza Seir. Artza, the Hachaim says, and based on Kabbalah, the vowel Hatach, Artza, is a sign of exaltedness. So it says it's the Madrega El Yoina, very high level. That Artza Seir, that Esav is going to be on this high level. So that's the middle era of when Esav is going to be on a high pedestal. And the third time is Sedei Edom, which means it's a field that'll be plowed, field of Edom. And that's when Mashiach comes, Edom will be destroyed. Edom Yeresha, it says Edom will be destroyed. And the Yidden will be successful, and that will be when Mashiach comes. There's Sedei Edom. Edom will be destroyed. It'll be like plowed like a field. Okay, so now comes the next. So that's the insight of the Hachaim that that the pasuk is giving us hints about the three eras of the wars between Esav and Yaakov. So far till now we've basically learned that the Yaakov sends angels that are available. They're in front of him. He understands that it's meant for him to use when he needs them, and here he needs them. It's Esav. They have to deal with Esav. He also wants to use them against Esav. They're beneficial against Esav. And he also is interested in peaceful relations with his brother, Esav Achiv. It emphasizes that he wants peace because it's his brother. Maybe I should have emphasized this earlier. He wants peace because it's his brother, and he is nervous because it's his brother, which means that his brother has merit. It's his brother, which means that he has these merits of his father and his grandfather, Yitzchok and Abraham, and therefore he wants to have a peaceful relationship. Now he's afraid of having a war, and then the other points that we mentioned was that he's checking out if Esav is the enemy or he's a brother. So Esav, Achiv, why it says Esav and Achiv. And then we mentioned that he wants to get there first. So he wants the angels he wants angels specifically because they have the ability to be there right away. They could be Lefanov and by Esav in the same moment. And then they could reply to him at the same moment. So that's it. So that's the meaning of Lefanov, and then it says that they reach Esav Artsas Seir Sedei Edom, that they could already be by Esav's habitat or Esav's residence immediately. And then the Hachaim mentioned this insight about the fact that there's three eras of the war between Esav and Yaakov. You have the era before the destruction, which we don't find so much about Edom being higher than the. In fact, we find that the Yidden had some type of dominion over Edom, and so there's an element of achva, of peace and unity, brotherliness, I should say. And then there's the Artsa Seir, which is the exaltedness of Edom, which basically means Christianity and Rome and so on. And that's the Artsa, and the Patach is a symbolic in Kabbalistic writings. It says Patach stands for Chochmah, and somehow that's connected wisdom, which is connected the highest level, that's considered the highest level. And so Artsa, which is connected to Chochmah, the Patach, the vowel, that's certain, the A sound, that Artsa, and that's why it doesn't use the Lamed, La'aretz, it uses Artsa, because La'aretz would be a Kum, it's not a Patach. The Patach is very symbolic of this idea of exaltedness, that Esav is going to be very exalted from the time of the destruction until Mashiach comes. And doesn't seem to mention anything about the second Beis Hamikdash. It's like from the time the first Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, seemingly that's what he's referring to, that's the unless you want to say that he means until from the time the second Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. That's when the exaltedness of Rome, of Edom became, I guess you could say such a thing, till the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Maybe that's what it means. That it's really from the time of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, because that's when Christianity really rose to power. When did Rome rise to power? Anyone know the history well? So from the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the Hachaim is saying that this is when the Edom rose to power, and the Yidden are not so recognizable, not so visible. We're so almost insignificant I guess in the eyes of the world, and so that's the Arza Seir where it sticks up where Rome sticks up its head and is exalted. And then Sidei Yadayim is when they're going to finally have their full destruction. That's Sidei Yadayim, they're going to be plowed like a field. Okay, now comes the next pasuk. And the pasuk says, Vayetzav Oisam Lemar. So he commanded them to say that this whole sentence that they should tell Esav that Yaakov said that I've lived with Lavan. And here the Hachaim is bothered with what exactly is, first of all, the word Lemar. You should tell them saying. What's the meaning of that word saying? Tell them saying. He says maybe that you should tell him that I am the one who calls you Adoini Esav. In other words, tell them that the wording that you're using is not just because you think, not just because the angels want to use it, nothing to do with the angels. These are the words that Yaakov told us to tell you. So in other words, that's the word lemor, means quotations. That this is the quote from Yaakov. Yaakov says, so said your servant Jacob. You should tell this to my master Esav. So said your servant Jacob. Like, make sure to emphasize that those flatteries, words of flattery, are from me. And if not, he's going to think that maybe the angels made up they chose the right words. And that's why he says Lamar. Now, the reason you have to say that also, the Hachaim says, because isn't that surprising that Yaakov would call Esav my master Esav when he's not talking to him? So it must be that he wanted the angels to say those words. So said my master Esav, that make sure to tell Esav that I'm the one saying that that Yaakov said that you're his master, and so on. Basically, all trying to appease him and flatter him in order not to have a war against him. And it does say that in order to save one for purpose of safety, you're allowed to flatter even a wicked person. There's such a Gemara. So that's the word lamor. But the question really in the pasuk is another question, and that the Hachaim mentions right here. That is, what is he telling him about Lavan? I was with Lavan. What's his whole what is he trying to convey to him about? I have animals, shor v'chamar. If you think of the wording, so it's a little surprising. He tells him, so said your this is what you should say to my master Esav. So said your servant Yaakov. I lived with Lavan, and I lingered until now. And then the verse says, and I have acquired oxen, donkeys, flocks, servants, maidservants. I'm sending to tell you, my Lord, to find favor in your eyes. So what's he giving him a whole drasha? What's he giving him a whole speech? What is he trying to tell Esav about this, where I lived? And so the first thing the Hachaim says, the interesting thing, he says, well, brothers, you would think maybe they want to schmooze with each other. They're going to talk to each other. So he says, it's an element, it's a way of showing love. And I'm going to share with you some of the good things, some of the bad things. It's a way of kurvas halavavos, he says, of bringing close the hearts. And so he's telling him what's happened to him, what's his latest, relates to him his latest occurrences and experiences. And so Yaakov shares this with him in order to find favor in Esav's eyes, that that Yaakov like trusts him, or he's confiding in him, sharing with him, and this will this will bring out and emphasize the brotherhood that they have. So that's one idea, which is an interesting thought. And the other thing he mentions is that he says that wouldn't be appropriate to distance me because look at what happened with Lavan. I was able to live with Lavan, and a Lavan who is known to be wicked and sly, and normally you can't live with such a person. He calls him a snake. Can't live with a snake. Nevertheless, I lived with him and in peace. And so this shows that Yaakov has a element of righteousness that's extreme, that's extraordinary. And because of that, it would be right for you to have some type of a closeness and cherishing for and love for your brother, affection, and so on. And you shouldn't think I was just there for a short amount of time. It was va'echar ad ata. I lingered there until now. I was there for 20 years. And maybe you'll say, oh, you know how I lasted there? I lasted there with him because I was just a pawn. I was a little nothing. I was just a servant that had nothing to do with Lavan. That's not true. I actually got wealthy there, and I did well. And so I wasn't just a little insignificant servant in Lavan's house. I was there for 20 years. I handled it, and I got wealthy there. I have shar v'chamar, and nevertheless, I am preparing myself or offering myself to be a eved to you, to be a servant of yours, and that my possessions are like your possessions. And these words are meant to melt a lave even, a heart of stone. Now, it's interesting that he uses these terms, that I am making myself like your servant. Now, I don't think he means it in such a literal sense, because Yaakov doesn't really say that I am going to be your slave now. But in whatever I own is really yours, he's giving him a nice gift, and but he's not going to work for him. So I think what it means is that he is presenting himself as if he's his slave. He calls him his master, and he says, he calls him your servant. So says your servant. But in a sense, he's giving him this huge gift. So he's emphasizing that he's humbling himself before Esav. So that's the wording. So that's the reason for this wording of the verse of why he's talking. So again, we have two interpretations of why he's giving him this whole speech about his all this happenings. Number one is he just wants to show him brotherliness and give him, share his story, his experiences, and to bring out the love. And the other one is that you should know that I was with Lavan. I handled it 20 years over there. Obviously, no regular person wouldn't be able to handle such a thing. There must be some element of extraordinary, unique character, and that Yaakov has, and therefore, and it's not like I was just pushed around over there. It's not like I was a small, insignificant servant. I was I was very successful, and And behold, with all that, having said all that, despite all that, I am offering myself as I'm calling myself your slave, and even giving you all of these possessions because I want to be close to you. And this is the goal, was to melt Esav's heart. Now the angels come back. We're in verse 7. The angels come back to Yaakov and they say, we went to your brother, to Esav, and he's coming towards you and he has 400 men. So what are they saying? We went to your brother, to Esav. Again, they have this surprising term. So they say, we went to your brother. What does that mean? That Esav is presenting himself as if he's your brother. So he's called, we went to your brother. He's presenting himself as your brother. And to Esav, but he's really Esav. So they're telling him, he's gonna look like he looks like he's your brother but he really is the real Esav, and he is filled with hatred. He's Russia. He's marked with hatred, and he's even coming towards you. And the way the Hachaim wants to translate it is, he's coming towards you, meaning that he's showing certain love. He wants to greet you, but he's really 400 men with him. So in other words, the pasuk is saying 4 things. Number 1, we went to your brother, which means he looks like he's acting like he's your brother. He's presenting himself as if he's your brother. But it's really Esav. And he's even coming towards you as presenting himself as if he's your brother. But there's really 400 people with him who are basically, he's ready with evil interests, and they're planning on killing you, basically. And so that's one way of explaining these 4 points that are mentioned in this pasuk. That your brother Esav, he's going towards you, and there's 400 people. Another way of interpreting it is, we came to your brother, and we came to him presenting ourselves as if he is your brother. In other words, we presented ourselves as if we're friendly with him. We're panim tzuhuvais, a radiant face. In other words, we're showing love. But El Esav, we also presented ourselves that we're Esav, with no interest in love, with an angry face. And the point is that the angels showed Esav their power, their awe that they can present, and what the Hachaim had mentioned earlier, that they're fiery, and they have these steel. They have these steel armor. They're showing awe. They're causing him fear, frightening him, and if he's not going to act in such a way of brotherliness. So in other words, either they're explaining who he is, or they're saying to Yaakov how we presented ourselves to Esav, and to your brother, and to Esav. We acted in both ways, just to sort of show him the 2 options he has. Okay, well, my time is up. We're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a good Shabbos if I don't see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.